Chake niba nita oshun, cheke nita oshun, ite were ita oshun, ite were ita oshun, ite were ita iya.
Okay.
Cheke nita oshun, ite were ite were ita oshun, ite were ite were ita oshun, ite were ita iya.
Okay, hello everybody. Welcome. Welcome once again to Ancestral Eyes. Tonight we have our esteemed guest, Babalawo Faseye, who is a priest of Ifa, a religious practice of the Yoruba people. He was also given the title of Oba, which means king. And I would like to just read a little bit about him, what we had posted on our page on Ancestral Eyes, just to give you a little bit of background before I get to dive in and ask all the questions. All right. And this time I'm going to be polite and I'm going to turn around. I'm going to say, Jean Jerome, go ahead. Say your hellos.
Boy, everyone. Welcome. It's very, very happy to have Babalawo Faseye with us this evening. He's my brother, my friend, a mentor, and very honored that he's joining us here on Ancestral Eyes, where we're going to talk a little bit more about the Ifá-Òrìsà practice and the indigenous practices of West Africa, not just in Nigeria and among the Yoruba, but also West Africa in terms of Benin a bit and Togo. So welcome,
everybody.
Thank you.
All right, awesome. Okay, so I will start and read a little bit about the description here. So Babalawo Faseye began his formal comparative religious study in 1998. For over 20 years now, he has diligently served his community as a healer, diviner, educator, and steward of indigenous spiritual traditions. Before becoming a respected leader in the tradition, he underwent many years of study and practice as an Ifa priest, which is also known as a Babalawo. Communicating with the spirit of destiny within Ifa, which is referred to as Orunmila, in order to divine a person's destiny, and when needed, to make any edits or changes to the person's destiny through ritual, or what we refer to as Igbo. As a leader within this culture and tradition, he is also specialized in various other forms of divination, such as mirror and water gazing, Kari divination, and other mystical spiritual disciplines in order to assist devoted seekers to find working solutions to many of life's various challenges. And also, I just wanted to make mention that within this worship and throughout your comparative studies, you have taken 28 trips to West Africa, including Nigeria, the Republic of Benin and Togo, for the purposes of initiation and religious study. Yes. Very impressive. I'm impressed. So I can't wait to start asking the questions. All right, so let me just put this out of the way. So once again, welcome, Babalawo Faseye. I get to interview you. Well, so does Jean Jerome, but I'm always the first one. So my first thing that I wanted to ask you, within that 28 years or 23 years of study, back in 1997, I believe, you were a healer, diviner, but there was a mention of you being a steward or the stewardship of indigenous belief systems. What are those belief systems? And can you elaborate a little bit on the Ifa, Ogboni, Orisha worship?
Sure.
Okay.
I started off initially, I had some teachers from some other traditions besides just West African tradition. I studied with the Taoist priest, who's already long since passed. He's already gone back home to the ancestors. But I studied with him for a long period of time, and trained in different aspects of exorcism and different forms of sorcery within those systems as well. And then I was also initiated as a priest in Tibetan Buddhism in the Nyingma and Kagyu schools of Tibetan Buddhism. And
nice.
One of my teachers had, years and years of, studying with him and training and things like that. And, lots of, mantra, sadhana, and things of that nature. He had shared with me that it would be beneficial to go and do some research into different African, practices. Of course, he wasn't like familiar with, difference between North Africa, South Africa, West Africa, or whatever. Just said, listen, you're an African man. You should look into, seeing what some spiritual practices that come out of Africa are, because you'll see that many of these things are very interconnected. That there's a lot of commonalities, a lot of similarity with these practices, different names, maybe different names for deities or rituals or things like that. But we're all trying to accomplish some similar things. And since it's part of your ancestry, you should go see some of what your ancestors are doing and incorporate that into your view and your practice of how you do what you do. So, I started off in terms of like indigenous, practices of being a steward, being, responsible for upholding, these traditions in a good, responsible, and, respectful way. Obviously, I'm not Tibetan. I'm not Asian, but the stewardship, as my teachers had shared with me, was about maintaining whatever practice it is that you do in a respectful manner, upholding the integrity of what those practices are, and really, respecting the cultures of where it comes from, with also a perspective of understanding how to facilitate change and how to progress things going forward. So that led to my trips, later on, studying, different things with Ifá. There was actually an Orisha priestess of Yemoja, who was the one who started me on the path of Ifá-Òrìsà. My first name she gave me was Babatunde. Babatunde means the father returns. So she was a librarian in Colorado. And so,
wow.
Yeah. This was when I was in private practice for Chinese medicine. So I went to grad school for acupuncture, Chinese medicine, things like that, herbal healing. Graduated in 2001. I graduated from that. So almost 20 years ago now. And so she started working with me. She actually would come to me for treatments. So that's how I met her. With the Orisha, or the ancestors had sent her to come and see me for getting some treatments. And so she started talking about more of the tradition and the practice and so on and so forth. And say, really, you should really look more into this. And, this would be another avenue for you to explore. And this was after my lamas, my teachers, my masters had told me, this is what you need to do. I was like, well, where do I start that at? And so, interesting enough, the universe facilitated, right? It provided.
I was just going to say, nothing happens without a meaningful coincidence, right?
Exactly. What's that? You call it was that? They call it serendipity, right? So,
or synchronicity. I don't know. Whatever.
Absolutely, it was, and it certainly was. It was a synchronous, event of how everything came together, and so then, subsequently, I made the first trip to West Africa. Of course, was to Nigeria to go and perform my Ifa initiations into the priesthood. Some people, some former friends, out to Nigeria to go do the initiation, and then to come back home and start working on studying more and just understanding more about what makes Ifa with Orisha, Ogboni, these different, basically like different practices inside of like the main cosmology of Yoruba spiritual
African traditional religions, right? Okay.
And so they people started sharing me, like, the first thing people said to me, they said, people would always kind of break down Ifa as like an acronym, right? IFA, right? The Indigenous Faith of Africa.
Right. Okay.
So some people say Ifa is just simply the wisdom of nature, right? So Ifa is about, so Ifa is, you could say that Ifa is a system it teaches, it's beautiful lessons veiled in allegory that describe the human condition, describe how things come into existence. And so that's sort of a generalized way of explaining it, but we're looking at how things come into existence in the universe. How do things come into existence? What is my relationship with this? What is my destiny in relation with how things are coming into existence? Understanding what the place of our ancestors, what they have in our lives as well, with some of the Orisha, which are like considered to be like they're spiritual beings, but they're also considered to be like elevated ancestors. So what's their role?
Like avatars? Would you call them avatars?
You could say something like that. Yeah, you could say like
Okay.
similar to avatars. I mean, it's a good comparison. I mean, basically, the principle behind an Orisha is we're talking about a deity, or we're talking about people who at one time, this is according to the Yoruba perspective, right? So there's a lot of perspectives, but just saying the Yoruba perspective, they believe, or they say that the Orunmila, these primordial beings, came from heaven to the earth. And when they came here, they these different primordial beings, Obatala, Shango, different, so on and so forth. When they came here, they helped to develop humanity, and they helped to create human beings. When they started recognizing different humans who had certain traits or certain aspects or certain affinities with different ones of these primordial beings, or these immortal or primordial beings, they began to take them in and initiated them into various schools and cults of their mysteries. Now, when these Orunmila went back to heaven, now you had a priesthood established of their mysteries, of men and women who were serving these particular deities and had been invested with different knowledge and abilities and powers and so on. When these humans passed away at a later point in time, as a result of their meritorious works of piety, doing good deeds in the community, maybe they made like a very big name for themselves, they later on would become elevated to become an Orisha, meaning their consciousness was said to merge with that of the consciousness of the original or primordial being. But because their mission was here on the earth, many times they chose to remain here on the earth realm in order to help all of humanity attain what they refer to as the good condition. So
to help all humans. Okay.
They're like bodhisattvas. If I went like I used a Buddhist perspective, they're like bodhisattvas. They're people who are very realized, or spirits that stayed on the earth plane to help us.
Right, right. That's awesome. Oh my God. So you went straight to Africa. Wow. Instead of like staying within, within America and looking for someone to initiate you into Ifa, you went straight to Africa. I love that. I think that's awesome.
Why not? You might as well take a trip out and get a chance to experience it and see how they do it back home.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I really, really like that. Now, could you tell us a little bit about, so we've touched upon Ifa and Orisha. Could you tell us a little bit about the Ogboni practices and how that offers the broader community that you serve, through rituals and healing? Are they similar to the Orisha and Ifa practices? So just kind of lead us through that, if you could.
So it's a good question. So it depends on who you ask.
Okay, we're asking you, and you're Oba, so we're taking your word.
So I've been exposed to many different sides or perspectives about how the Ogboni is seen. Some places in West Africa, whether you're talking about Nigeria, if you're talking about Togo or Benin or Ghana or things like that, they're depending upon what village you're in or so on, their perspectives behind what Ogboni is, how it came about, and so on differs. It's like any other denomination. Everybody has a slightly different perspective or understanding. Maybe some things that are unique, where they have some things that are like their own personal, culture that's involved in it. So Ogboni is like a society of men and women. It's considered to be like a confraternity. If we say fraternity, we're just talking about it being male, right? So it's a confraternity. So of men and women who come together to venerate and worship Mother Earth, that they refer to as Onile or Onili or Bodura. And so we come together, we venerate the earth as the primary ancestor, because there's many verses in Ifa that talks about how Onile or Mother Earth is the first ancestor. And at one time she was alone. She was by herself. Ifa taught this in Ejiobe. And so she prayed to Olodumare for humans to come and live here on the earth, to keep her company, so that she wouldn't be alone. So in Ogboni, we worship and we revere Mother Earth, and we come together to basically work with and to worship the divine feminine, right? Which is how we all got here. Right?
Exactly, like like our Mother Earth, Gaia. Okay, she's a living, breathing entity within herself.
Exactly.
That's how I always look at her.
Yes.
So that's how I refer to Mother Earth. I love it. I love it. I think that's great.
Some people call it aye. Some people call it, some people say onile. Like in other words, like there's a lot of words that are used to refer to the earth or to describe how how these things came about. We just say onile. There's a lot of like aliases and other words, like when we get into like worshiping and doing things in in the temple. There's other like praise names that we'll use for worshiping onile. And so there's different things that represent onile. There's some icons that they refer to as edan, which are like a joined pair. You can see pictures of it on the internet. I'm not saying anything that people haven't seen. You can look it up. There's like a paired bronze images. That's our way. It's one of our ways of being able to connect with Mother Earth and to venerate. There are some systems of divination that are inside of Oboni. A lot of herbs. And herbs, yeah.
Yes. I would think healing, yeah.
Because we're talking about like earth worship, then you have to have herbs and things like that. So there's spiritual baths. But some people say that Oboni is like a society of men and women that also maybe have some different occult powers, different gifts. Some people have clairvoyance, some people have clairaudience, clairsentience. Some people considered to be like part of like different societies like Iamis or whatever, things like that of that nature. So basically in Oboni, the principle of Oboni is that you have men and women who have different skill sets, different traits, different abilities, different gifts, God-given gifts. Some of them is with gifts that they've developed and crafted over years that all come together to worship Mother Earth together. And at different times in worship, there may be different people who may have different gifts from whatever their perspective or spiritual practice that they bring into to make the Oboni stronger. Everybody's their skills or their ashe, their power to all come together. So maybe you have somebody who's Orisha, somebody else who's Ifa, somebody else who only does Oboni, maybe somebody else who's some sort of shamanic tradition, other cultures. They all come together inside of Oboni for worship because they feel like everybody's skill sets and ashe or powers makes everyone stronger together inside of Oboni.
Absolutely. So mediums, in other words, are part of all of that as well, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. I like it. I think that's really good. Okay, that's great. Answered my question. Now, the other thing too, I'm going to ask you about your other divination systems. From what I read here, it was mirror, water gazing, cowrie divination. Well, I know cowrie divination has a lot to do with Ifa, but tell me a little bit about the mirror and water gazing and how that works, and how you incorporated all of that, or how did you get started on that? Where was the training for that?
I got initially exposed to water gazing from my Taoist teacher. He was the first person who shared with me about mirror gazing. Wow. He also shared with me about reading tea leaves, looking into the water to read. There's a lot, there's different practices, throughout Southeast Asia and places like that. There are different practices that deal with things that they refer to as dream yoga, which are ways to be able to engage in certain spiritual practices and to develop the fruit of a spiritual practice through one's dream state as well. So there's certain things that a person does in the dream state and things you learn how to do for how to bring certain things from the dream state into the physical world. So when I went back to Nigeria, and went to Ghana and Togo and Benin, everybody doesn't do it, but I had opportunity to see that there also are people in West Africa who also do, water gazing. Some people who also gaze into mirrors to be able to see what's going on. The principle is similar. It's a very, very similar principle, but it's just coming from their particular cultural construct or perspective behind how they grew up in their community and how they were in that. So a lot of people that I met in West Africa, when they would share different things with me, and I asked a lot of questions. I would say, hey, what about this? Do you guys do this? Do you guys do that? And so on. Oh, no, I don't do that, but I know this other she does this, or this Baba does that, or whatever. And so they would introduce different people who had different skill sets, different abilities, and things like that. I saw a lot of overlap. So some things, you know, I certainly got exposed and trained in some aspects of it in West Africa, but because I had already had a fairly good grasp or perspective on it, it wasn't like it was something that I was brand new that I hadn't been exposed to. So I have to like do this all over again. It was more like an exchange. A different perspective or aspect of it that you haven't seen.
Exactly. You know, it's amazing when I think about, you know, all these other cultures, because when I'm reading this, I'm thinking mirror, water gazing. I'm thinking more in the terms of your traditional kind of witch, you know, Celtic witch and Slavic witch, whatever. But anyway, you just think it's that, but yet there's all these other cultures. I mean, it really goes to show that we are so connected as a people through this entire planet, you know, that of course we're going to have all of that in all different cultures, you know. So I think we're all
awesome. I mean, I met a Babalawo one time that just to add to what you're saying, I met a Babalawo one time that can read Odu Ifa off of a person's palms. And he literally, let me look at your palm. And I held my palm, and he, you know, depending upon the lines and the way the lines showed up inside the palm, oh, this Odu is Oyeku, so-and-so, so-and-so, and we flip it this way, and literally, I kid you not, with people that I brought out with me to Nigeria, he was telling people of all these things that were going on inside their life. Oh, you're having this and this, and there's no way that he could have possibly known that. But he showed us. Now, that doesn't mean everybody in Nigeria, everybody in Ifa does that.
Yeah. So palmistry.
Yeah.
Ifa.
Yeah, it was his way of, however, maybe one of his grandfathers, one of his ancestors, someone had passed on that knowledge and that skill set to him. And, you know, and of course, when we saw it in application, we couldn't deny that he certainly had something there, because he didn't throw Pele. He didn't use any standard tools of Babalawo. He just looked at the palm and literally could see Odu and be able to tell people what was happening. So I thought that was really fascinating, because I would have never thought that would be inside of the practice.
No kidding. You know, the more I learn about Ifa, the more I'm like, wow. You know, it just, I don't know. It surprises me all the time. So I like it. So, okay. So now I'm going to go on and ask you, with regards to your initiation as a Babalawo, you went straight to Africa for that, right?
Correct.
As opposed to being here in America. Okay. Correct. So now, when you were going back, your trips to Africa, this was to achieve what? Were you to further your study with Ifa? I mean, once you were initiated as a Babalawo, right? You kept going back because you had many trips going back. So what was the purpose of that? Was it to further study Ifa?
So, you know, so when I got initiated to Ifa, you know, I wanted to know more about, you know, the practice, more understand, you know. So let me just backtrack. A teacher of mine a long time ago, before Ifa, had told me, in all things you do, you need to establish view and practice first. Before you can engage in the practice, you need to understand, you need to establish your view. Who am I? How did I get here? What am I here to do? What's my destiny? You know, all those things. You need to establish the view. And the view is unique for every person, right? But in any spiritual practice, you look at the view first. Now, when you have the view of those things and you've done the introspection, then now you can start saying, let me begin to develop the practice, or start to engage in the practice from there. So, you know, I went, you know, did a lot of trips to Nigeria to go basically for myself. You know, I know a lot of people have different reasons they like to go. You know, some African Americans, some people go because they want to connect, you know, more with the culture there and whatever. And that's certainly very important.
That's their ancestral roots.
Exactly. It's our ancestral roots. But, you know, many of us, myself included, like, my ancestry is not just from Nigeria, right? So I'm not Yoruba. You know, I wasn't born in Nigeria. I'm not Yoruba. A lot of my ancestors were from the Congo, you know. Many of my ancestors, you know, were from Togo and different places. Like, I have a small amount of, you know, Yoruba ancestry. So I wanted to kind of see, like, do some research, because that's what I've done most of my life. You know, I mean, my family's African American. Most of my ancestors, you know, many of my ancestors are all buried here. So I'm very comfortable in who I am as a person here. So I wanted to see, like, well, how do they do things in different parts of West Africa? Okay, well, in this village, what do they do when they do this? Okay, Abiokuta. They do Ifa and meet different Babalawos, Yanifas, Orisha priests. see some different nuances behind how they did this. They would share little tidbits with me that they say, go to this person here in Oshogbo and go to see this. And so I went to go do, because like my bio says, I'm engaged in comparative study of religion.
Right.
So I study all religions. That's just me. I like to study all religions. So I wanted to see, what do all places do? Like, what are the things they have in common? As well as what are some of the things that they do differently? And I found that depending on what village you went to, a different place, everybody had a different perspective. This place say, oh, we do this ritual with Oshun with this and this. We give her the thing. We give her snail or whatever, being. Another village will say, we never give that to Oshun. That's a big taboo. We don't do that. So, okay. So I wanted to get more of a perspective behind what were the underlying concepts and principles, the cosmology, the view of people throughout all of West Africa, not just Nigeria, not just Benin, not just Togo, but like if we're talking about African consciousness, or we're talking about indigenous consciousness, right? Because it's not just African.
Right.
What are these unifying concepts that everybody has? And I also wanted to see if there was any overlap, any similarities with things that I had already studied and already been initiated to with what I would find in different parts of West Africa.
Right.
And I found that there was a lot of things that were common and a lot of things that were different. So
it gave you definitely a broader perspective, right? With a few nuances there and that, right? Absolutely. So now that's going to lead me into my other question. So you, having experienced these other parts of Africa, obviously, and getting to understand the different belief systems and that, you becoming a king, an Oba, okay? How, like, what does that mean when you were given that title, Oba? Was it strictly because of your studying, or did you have to undergo like another initiation, like a Babalawo, you know? So, you know, is it more spiritual as opposed to something that is given to you strictly as a title because of your studies?
I think it can be all those things, depending upon the person. I think it can be a combination. It can be any or all those things. For myself, because I had traveled, I 28 trips back and forth to West Africa. Usually I would be in West Africa anywhere between, 2 months to 3+ months at a time, right? So it's a long time to be away. Stuff in one place, maybe hang out with these priests or, different folks for maybe a couple of weeks here, or maybe 3-4 weeks here, and then go to another place and study, and building and developing, because, in West Africa, and a lot of times Babalawos, for example, will study with somebody for, say, a certain period of time. They have some sort of apprenticeship with somebody for a prescribed period of time. After that, then they'll go to a different village. They learn this. They go to a different village. They learn over here. So it's like years and years of study, but they usually have like several master teachers. And as time goes by, when they now begin to go into practice, their practice may reflect having studied with multiple masters. And now it's like, this is their way of how they do it, their lineage, right? That they brought all these things together, right? So
they can bring their own thread together. In other words, their own path. It's
like you're unifying all these things, but you're developing your own, right? Your own. It's like being a doctor. You intern with this person, you intern with this other doctor, this other physician, whatever, before you go into practice, right? To develop perspective and training. So when I became, installed as an Oba, I did go through an initiation, right? There was 9 days of what they call Ipebi, which is what they call it in Nigeria. And they call it that in Benin and other places. And, it basically just means that it's like a period of isolation. It's a period of confinement where you go through different mystical journeys and different types of secret rituals that take place with other deities and other orishas, with other spiritual forces. And certain things are introduced to you, different things are done to your body physically, different mysteries that you're initiated to as well, and some different types of, I guess you could call it ashe, or spiritual gifts,
energies,
that are infused inside of the person's body. So I went through you know, over a week of rituals, of things that were done, sometimes day and night. They like wake up super early, take bath. Okay, we go here, now we do this and that, and so on and so forth. And then when all that was completed, then there was a time when I was brought before a dozen, 12 other Obas that were there to confirm. They consulted with Ifa,
Right.
you know, ask Ifa, okay, what does Ifa say about the ritual we did for this person? And Ifa cast, for me, Ifa cast Ejiobe. So everybody in Ifa who knows what Ejiobe is Oban Ifa. Ejiobe is the first Odu of Ifa, the singer in Ifa. So my Odu as an Oba was Ejiobe, the first
Wow.
that gives birth to all the other signs. And so they say,
Wow.
we know those persons, we've done this, you know, so on and so forth. The different Obas asked me different questions and things like that. You know, different things that were taught to me. They shared other things with me as well. And then they confirmed me. And then after that, then there was a whole other series of, you know, things you have to do ritually, and then the presentation before the community. It may be done differently for different people, maybe in different villages, maybe they just confer the title. To my, you know, to my knowledge, for myself, there were some, you know, very difficult, very difficult rituals, and like it is like an initiation. Sometimes they call it, they call them Inikeji Orisha, which means like one who's also like a living embodiment of Orisha. So that was
so the kingship in Oba is really initiatory rather than, you know, casting a ballot and electing you, right? Is kind of like when I'm thinking king, you know, or something, or by birthright, right? Or something like that. So it's really an initiatory process.
And it can be like elected, like if somebody was an Oba, for example, like there's different types of Obas in African culture and in West African culture. There's like an Oba of a traditional village. There can be somebody who's an Oba inside of Ifa. There's somebody who can be an Oba inside of Oboni. Huh? There can be somebody who's an Oba inside of Orisha. So there's a lot of different, so it's like you have political Obas, you have religious Obas, you know, you have, and so for example, somebody can have a son, this Oba of this village passes on, he goes back home to the ancestors. And then later on, if he has a son or daughter, they would inherit the throne. So for me, I was told, because when I did my rituals, they did divination, told me that my ancestors before me, where I came from a royal family, my ancestors were Oba, were kings and so on. And so I was asked to come back to reinstall into the titles and the ashe, the blessings and royalty that was part of my family
lineage. So
it was to reclaim those things that had been part of my family's lineage from, you know, a long time ago.
Wow. I love it. You know, you go to Africa and you really get to your ancestral roots, right?
Yeah,
I love that. So
it's not something you wake up and say, hey, I want to become an Oba one day when I grow up. So it just kind of happened.
Like, who does that, right? Okay. Oh my God.
But I think it's very important to know in Baba Faseye's situation a few things. One is, again, that this journey and you know, 28 trips, you know, staying, you know, 2-3 months at a time, and you know, receiving initiations in different lineages and in different Orisha as well, because I believe, but in case of Baba Faseye, he's also been initiated to many Orishas to his head.
Yeah, maybe 25 plus Orishas I've done Idoshu to my head. So that's a lot.
So, which is basically taking the spirituality of those Orishas and putting it to live together and basically coexist with one's Ori, one's Joto, and one's Emi, one's spirit. So that's, you know, when you see that effort and all that, you can see the trajectory. And again, the spiritual aspects, right? It's a reclaiming of a spiritual legacy, of a spiritual history that transcends just one culture, because again, although many of his trips were to Nigeria and into different parts of the Yoruba territory in terms of Oyo, Ile-Ife, Oshobo, and just to name a few. Abeokuta, yeah, the list goes on. But also that he went to, you know, Benin and you know, and Togo, right? So it's a very interesting, right, trajectory. Always to rescue a spiritual tradition, right?
Right.
Not so much a political or social situation, but really like to get in
spiritual,
very deeply into the mysteries, to train with the Babalawo,
absolutely,
to then, practice the Babalawos, and then impart that knowledge and transfer that knowledge to the community, and serving his community in the United States, right? So it's a very interesting journey, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people in anything, particularly these types of practices, whatever. I think that everybody likes to try, at least at their core, people are always trying to find out more about themselves. They want to learn more about who they are,
right.
What their purpose is. So for me, in addition to more research and things like that, like my goal wasn't to go to Nigeria to try, or West Africa or Benin or Togo to try to like rescue or to be, say to, preserve different traditions, things like that, because I'm not from West Africa, and there's already people there. There's a thriving culture there. They don't need me to come in to rescue them, right? They've already got that. So for me, the goal was really finding out more about myself, understanding more about what I'm here to do, what my goals and my strengths and skills are, and to find out how do I put those things, into action. In other words, developing more self-knowledge, but also developing more wisdom, right? Because if you look at wisdom, right? Wisdom, if you break it down etymologically, you have a wise dome. So if you have wisdom, a wise dome, it means you have a wise head. So you get wisdom through developing enough knowledge, right? So you acquire the knowledge, and then you learn how to apply the knowledge. So when you learn how to apply the knowledge, then you develop wisdom, which is a constant ongoing thing that we're always striving for wisdom. So
awesome. I love that definition.
Wisdom.
Right. I love it. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So now I'm going to ask you, like you just finished saying, so there you are. Obviously, you're not going to stay in Africa and suddenly become the king and whatever. They've got their own established culture. So how does that translate to you in America? Okay, so you're now given the kingship and you're an Oba. How does that translate to you here in America?
So the title I received as an Oba was specifically as the leader of my temple, of my association that I have as well, of the community of priests and priestesses and chiefs that I preside over, internationally. I have people, I have people in Europe and Germany and Spain and throughout various parts of Afghanistan, different parts of the world. That I go and do work with and do teachings and things like that, and preside over the community in the best way that I can, to teach and to empower others to do things that are that are part of their destiny as well. And so so obviously we live in America, right? So you don't have anybody. Even the president is not a king, right? He's an elected official. So America obviously has its own sovereignty, right? Nobody can establish. We talk about kingship and things like that in West African culture. Many times these are people who are like rulers of towns and things like that. And so when I received this position or this title through the initiation of Oba, specifically with the authority and the ashe to be able to facilitate changes and to be a custodian of the tradition and to be an overseer of the practice specifically within my jurisdiction, of people who come to me to work with and so on and so forth, and to build people in a positive way. But specifically, any title, anything you do in Africa, if you're an Oba of this place, everybody operates within their own jurisdiction. So my jurisdiction is not, of the whole country. It's specifically, I live in America, so I have Oba in America because I live here, right? Can't be an Oba in Africa, but specifically within my within my association that we've established and that we founded here in the United States.
Right. So that's your spiritual beliefs, and it's put into an association. So let me understand this as an ex-banker, okay? Because I gotta put that out. All right. I'm translating because I see association. We're going from king to association. So basically, you are the president and founder of your own legal entity, like your own corporation, right? I I can't pronounce the word.
Orisha basically means like Orisha White House. It's what that means in Yoruba. It just refers to the purity and the cleanliness of our hearts and of our life and our conduct, right speech, right action, right thoughts, the things that we strive for in our day-to-day life. So we run a temple, we run an organization here that has a registered nonprofit organizational aspect.
Okay, so you are a corporation, right? Under your own corporation, and you operate under the laws of your country in America, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you're a corporation, so you're going to operate under your laws, right?
Yeah, we're operating under our own authority, our own jurisdiction. We have a constitution that guides what we do. Absolutely. All of our members who come and join our association, and our group, all read the Constitution, which basically describes how we do what we do, what our outlook is. We're not seeking to supplant anyone in West Africa. We're not supplanting anyone here in America. We're not trying to dominate anyone. We're just saying this is who we are, this is what we do. This is how we're doing things. We want to conduct ourselves in a good way. Yoruba, they call it iwapele. We're respectful of everybody, of all races, creeds, colors, backgrounds, all those things.
Right.
Any organization, most organizations usually have like a handbook or guideline, a constitution of how the organization is run. And so, we have a similar thing. Most churches have that as well. That says, hey.
I was just going to say that. I was going to say other churches have to have that, right? In order to operate and function in America. So why would you not? Obviously. Okay.
We haven't had to do that here in America, because I'm not saying they don't have that in different parts of West Africa, but a lot of my teachers encouraged me. They said, listen, Baba, we do this like this here in this place, in this village. Maybe when you get back home, you check with Ifa, you have to do some things differently, because what we have here, maybe you don't have there, or you don't do like this, or so on. And so when you come home, check with Ifa, and you have to find out how to make what your understanding of this is, how to make this livable and sustainable in the land in which you live. So for us, this is how we came out to express.
So to me, okay, I'm gonna translate this the way I see it. Okay, so your association, now Jean Jerome has his association, Consejo Cultural do Yoruba of Canada. Now we also have another Baba Nelson in Mexico. Okay, and I'm going to say this because so we have a Canadian association, we have an American, and we have a Mexican. So I'm going to call this here we go. All right. So I'm going to call this the NAFTA of Ifa. Okay. A strategic relationship with Mexico, Canada, and the USA. All right. So I'm calling it NAFTA of Ifa. I don't care what anybody else says.
And I want to extend that as well to Bokono Dafoji's Abomale Vodun Fa Temple in Uruguay, which basically works. And Ifa World Conference, Baba Nelson represents Ifa World Conference, represents a group of 18 Babalawos in Mexico, United States, and Europe, as well as studying with and exchanging knowledge and information with a lineage in Lagos in Nigeria. So it's wonderful for all of our associations. I think we have a common vision, which is to respectfully exchange ideas, to basically learn, from the different lineages, from the different ways of practicing these indigenous belief systems of Ifa, Òrìsà, Vodun, and being able to share that. And I think one very important thing that I see with Baba Faseye, one of the reasons we got along so well since the first time we met, is that one of the reasons that Ifa survived in Cuba during the slave Holocaust was the ability of the Cuban ancestors, and that were in those cases Nigerian, Yoruba, as well as Fon and other ethnic groups that came in successive waves of slaves brought over in the slave Holocaust. Their ability to survive was basically their ability to adapt to not just take their solely their aesthetic and say we're going to practice it just the way we practiced it, or our ancestors or forefathers practiced it in Nigeria, or in Benin, or in Togo, etc., or in Mozambique or Angola, but to look at the essence of the spirituality and the reality of the harsh conditions and the different climate, social, a condition of slavery, education, and be able to adapt it. But in adapting, we all know that any species or anything for it to survive must be able to adapt. And I think that what I find and respected very much with Baba Faseye was he wasn't trying to just bring or implant, right, a West African aesthetic or a West African style of doing Ifa and just, transplant it and boom, into an American or context, but taking the essence of the teachings, the essence of the spirituality, the essence of the divination, the essence of the medicine, and adapting it to a different culture and a different land, and a land which has its own ancestry, right? Which has indigenous ancestry, First Nations ancestry that must be respected. And I guess that leads me to that question, Baba Faseye, which is, is sometimes controversial, and how can I put it to you, is definitely something which I think many African Americans and also African Canadians would like to know is in your search. You said something which is very interesting. You said you were very proud. You had a defined ancestry. Your forefathers in the United States have long, proud tradition of hardworking people in the States, African Americans contributing to society, having sometimes different belief systems, Christianity, and so forth. But how is it that what was your optic? Because from what I know about you, and also from what you've again reiterated this evening, you didn't go to Nigeria looking for your African roots, but more to, the same way that you went to other tradition, you went to learn, to reacquaint yourself, but you seem to have your own identity, your own, your feet firmly planted on U.S. soil, on U.S. ground. And what is from your own lessons, from your own journey, personal journey in development, journey of development and personal development, what message, what are the lessons you learn, and what are the messages and lessons you'd like to share with, other African American and African Canadian people?
I think everybody, in anything that you do, everybody has their own reasons for why they go into things. Everybody has their own perspective, their own viewpoint. Some people maybe, want to go to West Africa to, maybe to learn more about textile, more how they make fabrics and things like that. I mean, in any country, every country has things that they specialize in, or things that people who are, local people there that, that they do their different, trades and crafts, spiritual practices, religious beliefs, all those things. Because I had such a broad, view, such a broad perspective, a broad training. I have a lot of my family. I have relatives of mine. One of my aunts has a huge church out in Texas. She's like the pastor of a big church out there. She lays hands on people. She reads from the book of Psalms. She gets out the olive oil and she puts hands on people, and
I love it.
That's part of her anointing. My father also used to be a pastor, used to be a reverend of the church as well. So, I mean, I grew up in that, I grew up in the, in those religious systems as well. Certainly in mainstream Christianity, things like that, bibliomancy, things like that. My family would go and, pray and hold the Bible and then open it. And then wherever you open it, there's a passage here from the Most High. Okay, we're being told, so on and so forth, live your life. Certainly everybody doesn't do that, but that was how I grew up. So, there may be some, sometimes, people, different practices, maybe there's some contradictions behind things, or people feel like, this isn't what this other place does or whatever. My parents just gave me a very broad viewpoint. my mother and my father always told me very clearly, listen, you know, if somebody does something in some place that you don't like, you don't have to do it. You don't have to open your mouth and say anything about something that you don't like. You know, there's more than one way to cook rice. Somebody likes to cook rice with water. Somebody else uses coconut milk. Somebody else uses chicken broth. Everybody cooks their rice different, right? Depending on what you want. But at the end of the day, it's still cooking rice.
You're still eating rice.
There's a lot of ways to do it. But if somebody does something that you don't like, then you don't have to do it in that way. But when you show up to someone else's home, when you show up into somebody else's community, then you conduct yourself accordingly, right? That doesn't mean that when you go there, that now you're going to take everything that you did and this other person, well, this person cooks their rice with coconut milk. So from now on, when I get home, I'm only going to cook like, unless you like the dish so much and that's what you like. You're just like, I really identify with that. And every time I make rice, I only want to use, and that's okay. There's no problem. For me, I just wanted to see a lot of different expressions of what African culture was, because African American, we talk African American culture, it's not just one thing. It's not just Yoruba. Yeah. It's not just Congo. It's not just home. Yeah. It's not just a homie. It's not just from Benin or from Togo. There's also influences of, you know, through various ways in which it's occurred. Many of us have European ancestry and things like that. Some of us may have some Hispanic ancestry. Some of us have Native American ancestry, you know, all those things. So for me, I wanted to experience what I felt was an embodiment of the viewpoint of many African peoples. And what I saw was that despite how everybody may or may not have done some things different, they had some similar views, similar goals, similar values. Everybody's trying to raise their kids. Everybody's trying to pay their bills. They're trying to take care of their home. They're trying to take care of their families in the best way that they know how to do so, right? In some places they would divine, and the order of Odus would be different than a different village and whatever. And so what I took away from it was that we can all be in the same room together and we can all disagree and we can all have a very different viewpoint and we can very strongly disagree, but we can still work together in order to get things done. And so because I've seen a lot of this, you know, in the African American community and different, and I think every community has this, different challenges that we deal with. Sometimes people can feel that to disagree with somebody means you have to be their enemy now. Because I disagree with you now, it doesn't mean that. That only means you're at a very low vibration. That your level of understanding is very low. You don't really have proper understanding. If you have to make somebody your enemy because somebody else doesn't understand you, then that means that's because of your own conditioning of something that's taught you that you learned. It's a learned behavior pattern, right? So I wanted to get to, you know, in Buddhism, they say you're always seeking to get to the source of your own ignorance. So I wanted to see what were the different things that I could use to help make things better, to give me a better perspective behind what is the whole experience of who my ancestors were, who my family, a lot of my family's in government, some of my family's in politics, and all sorts of different things. And so my family, just the way I grew up, they said, hey, go travel, like, you know, go to different parts of the world. I mean, I've been all over the world. I've been to England, I've been to London, I've been to Paris, I've been to Amsterdam, you name it, I've been there. Right. So, you know, not just within an African perspective, but just, I like people. I like to meet people. I like to get to see how different things are done. And I feel personally for myself, the more people you know, then the better your life is and the more resources and things that you can have. And if I can connect with different people in different places, then it broadens my bandwidth of things that I want to try to get accomplished here where I live, because I know more people. I'm able to tap in to different things and different cultures and different perspectives. Somebody else who's in this thing or that, not even connected to religion, but just people from different backgrounds. I can form friendships. Absolutely. People, and it makes my life that much richer. Ashe. That's what I took away from it. That was my reason, was I wanted to experience all these different things. And sometimes I like to see the contradictions behind things. It's interesting to see that, because when I meet from a different point of view, I can see where they're coming from without having to side with them or have a judgment. I can see where you're coming from. I can still stand on my own square, and you at the same time, I can appreciate what somebody else has to say.
Absolutely. So, it's just a different perspective, you know, and there's nothing wrong with reaching out and networking with other people. I mean, this was the whole premise behind our Ancestral Eyes, is to reach out and communicate with other belief systems. What do we have in common? What do we have in difference? And even if we're different, who cares? The point is that we're all trying to do the same thing for our community, to alleviate pain, suffering, you know, and if we can't do it, or we know someone who, let's say, specializes in something, we'll refer them there, right? We're not going to sit here in our own little square and say, well, you know, I disagree with you, and therefore that's it, you know. I mean, what does that accomplish?
Which brings a very interesting, you know, a different paradigm and a different way of looking at the belief system, like Ifá-Òrìsà and other belief system. I mean, as Baba Faseye knows, and we often, you know, read on Facebook and other social media and other press releases, there are constant efforts on both sides of the Atlantic to try to harmonize or create some sort of dogmatic hegemony in terms of control of the tradition, when in reality, it was never like that. In reality, when you see the different lineages, the different pension in terms of practice, in terms of taboos, in terms of ways of looking at, you know, the way the spirit world works, the cosmology, and seeing how all of these different traditions have been able to survive and in many cases thrive, even in the most difficult conditions. It was not because they were all, you know, practicing the exact same thing or the exact same style, but because they were able to adapt and listen to their true ancestral messages, to listen to their guiding spirits, to their jotos, to listen to the words of Ifa, to the words of their Orisha, etc., and adapt. And that basically is not, you know, the importance is that the only sort of common goal that we look for is respect of each other's, you know, human rights, each other's practice and right to practice in a healthy way, that our practices not be used as a tool or a weapon, almost weaponized, to, you know, do harm or to, you know, have bragging rights or to intimidate, nor be intimidated, but that there is a respect, a profound respect and recognition of our indigenous belief systems in whatever lineage or vein you practice, so that they can be respected in the West, in the United States, in Mexico, in the Caribbean, in Brazil. As we know, many people are watching know there have been you know, several attacks and abuses of the Candomblé community in Brazil by other religious extremists and essentially hooligans. But again, it's because of this ignorance and prejudice that these things are allowed to occur. And I see enormous amounts of energy and time and resources and media time trying to be expended to try to have some sort of one organization to govern them all. It almost reminds me of the Lord of the Rings. One ring to rule them all, right? But yet failing to see that, as Baba Faseye has indicated, that it is really, the strength is in a fellowship, in a mutual respect of our individual and our communal missions to bring about development of the spirit, development of our communities, development of our families, and that we preserve and save the next generation. That is really the purpose of our belief system, right?
So that you don't lose your traditions. They're going to change. You're in another country. You are in the new country. You have to adapt. It comes down to just the practical terms, right? I like what I saw what Beth Weeks had said. Could we put that back up? Say no to homogenizing Ifá-Òrìsà. Diversity. Good word. Exactly. Diversity is life. Okay. You can't come here and, from wherever, right, and say, I have to shake this stick, this ebony, whatever stick 3 times. Sorry, we don't have that stick. It's going to have to be a willow and you're going to have to shake it only 2 times, right? Whatever, right? It's not about homogenizing it. It's about accepting and adapting. All right. And it's the diversity. And I think that is important in any religious group that's coming over here.
Or
right?
trying.
Or anywhere.
I think that's an important thing, what you both are saying. You know, in my own experience, just speaking for myself, in different places that I would go to and see different ways of doing things, every time I would go with a different teacher or a different priest or whatever their background was, whatever it is that they were serving or that they were, ordained to, they would have one way of doing things. Okay, this and that and the other, and we would go to a different village, and then somebody, did something a slightly different way. So in my own experience, generally for the most part, if we're just talking about Ifá-Òrìsà, Vodun, Fa, Efa, whatever you want to call it, depending on what country in West Africa you're talking about, for the most part, everybody, even though they quarrel with one another and argue and so on and so forth, all people do, they generally have a level of respect for everyone's varied ways of doing things, right? That's what I refer to that as sacred difference, or respecting sacred difference.
Right. Absolutely.
That exists, right? The difference takes place. There are some differences in terms of how it shows up here, because a lot of people, people are new to these traditions. They're wanting to learn about it. They're very eager students. They're always asking a ton of questions and whatever. And some places and some cultures there in West Africa, some questions, like in the culture, it means that you're looking to buy something, like you're looking to be a customer. So, so in other words, it's also about understanding how to ask the questions, understanding, how to show up, how to interact with the people, being really firm, and grounded, about, who and what you are and things like that. We talk about stuff like hegemony or some governing body. There's any organization in anything and say, hey, we're the presiding group of this and that, and all people have to be this and that. At the end of the day, the reality of it is this: rulership only takes place with the consent of the people. If the people don't consent to that, then you cannot rule over them. And rulership is not something that you do like this. It's about delegating responsibility. It's about working with people in a positive way. We have enough examples of this already on a global level, even in North America, of what heavy-handedness looks like, and the type of feedback we get from people when you're presiding in that way. One of my teachers told me a long time ago, a martial art teacher of mine told me a long time ago, that to be a good leader, you have to be a good follower first, but you also have to be a good listener. You have to be good at hearing what people have to say. You have to be good at step out of judgment and not feeling immediately offended that somebody's threatening your identity, of this very fragile identity that you formed about yourself and about the world and everything. If you can't do that, then you're not ready to be a leader. And so you have to be, because you're going to hear things that you may not like. You might even hear things about yourself you don't like, or that may not be true, but you still have to be able to hold space for it and allow these things to coexist while still staying true to your course and staying true to the vision and staying true to the ancestors. So, I think in the end, I think a lot of just religious traditions are trying to do that. I think when we get into like hegemony and things like this, these kind of things do exist, maybe more so in countries that are still developing nations, and there's still different things that they're still working on with their economy and things like that. Like there's certain themes of things that show up depending upon where you're at, where you're interacting. There's certain things that tend to show up when every day your life is about, like, how do I eat today? And that's at the forefront of your mind every single day. Fight or flight. How do I eat? Your entire approach and your entire outlook, your entire thought process is completely different, because if it's me or him, it's him. It's dog eat dog all the time. You learn it. I got to package what I do a certain way so that I can get business and money and this and that, certainly. But your outlook is very different because you don't know what's going to happen one day from the next. And so we just have to be careful behind things that we do in terms of what things we model. Like one of my teachers told me a long time ago, anybody that you study with, always look at that person's life and see, is there things in that person's life that you feel that you would like to model? Is that somebody, the way he lives? Do you share those things? Because the more you are with somebody, the more you will become like them. So that's why you have to be very firm about who you are. And Ifa talks about that, right? They refer to that as Ishe. In other words, talking about that your ancestors and your mother and your father always being who your parents are, what your roots are, your maternal roots, your paternal roots. Right. If your mother's lineage, when you're solid about that, then no matter where it is that you go, there's nothing that's going to move you off your course. And that applies to anything in the world, any religion. It's not specific to or anything like that by any means.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to ask, and I think you probably answered it, but I'm just going to see if there's anything else you wanted to add to it. Sure. Knowing how you came to follow your path was obviously your own personal curiosity. Sure. Right. And is that the only thing that made you decide to follow your path, or was there anything else that that you sort of said, well, today I'm going to go to Africa, or was it just
and I get the corollary or the follow-up question to that.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's a good question. It's a tricky question to answer because, the path is not one. It's not
way of looking at it, right?
It's not a fixed thing. I practice Orisha. I practice a lot of different things. I observe and I respectfully practice and hold space for many different, spiritual practices. For me personally, I don't find that there's a conflict between these things. I know there are some people who are very purist and feel like if you do Ifa, you can only, and you can't. Everybody is allowed to do whatever they want to do in their own homes and live their lives in the way that they wish to. Absolutely. If like, for example, you're just using martial arts as a parallel, because this is a big part of what I also do as well. I'm a trainer in a lot of different martial arts systems. Every different system that I've trained from A to Z, from start to finish, and different things. I can teach all these arts combined together, or I can teach the entire syllabus of each one of these systems individually, one by one, without anything else bleeding in it, because I'd have the entire curriculum behind how that whole thing is put together. As long as you know what the underlying foundation is and the principles behind those things, and you're doing things in a respectful manner and with great care and with diligence and keeping the integrity of something, then you know that, first of all, if you're practicing something that is not indigenous to that's not in the land or native to the land and where you live, you're automatically going to change. And the minute you touch something as somebody who's not from that culture, the practice that you're doing automatically changes. By default of you touching it, it's already changed, because you're not Yoruba, you're not German, you're not this, you're not that. So as soon as you get involved in that, that practice has already changed and shifted.
Slanted.
I don't think in Yoruba. I don't sleep in Yoruba. I don't eat all Yoruba food. Like, I'm not saying I'm just, I don't eat all food. I don't eat all food. I don't eat only Greek food. So it depends upon what you're what you're working with, so to speak. So for me, I practice tradition in a respectful way. I respect sacred difference. I hold space for a lot of different practices. I can converse with people of all these different backgrounds. So for me, the path is a personal thing. Ifa is a tool, right? It's a blueprint. It's the wisdom of nature that comes from God, or the High, or the Grand Architect, whatever you want to call it. So they say Ifa is based upon binary codes, based on ones and zeros, right? So it's based because the language of the universe is mathematics. That means the language of the universe is not German, it's not Russian, it's not Chinese, it's not Filipino. It's the language of the universe, because it's mathematics. That means numbers don't lie. Humans make errors all the time. But if we're dealing with pure mathematics, that's pure language, right? That's how everything in the universe is divinely ordered in that way. So if we're following it, we're staying true to that premise, that's how you stay on path. So Ifa is about giving you these insights and these tools that allows you to know if you're still on your path. My path is everybody else's path. and somebody else is another.
Yeah, and mine is individual too.
Everybody has a different path, so we might intersect with one another like branches on a tree, and have this intersection where we all have this connection. So we all have the connection because we're all on the same planet, but yet we all splinter in these different ways, but yet we're still connected to the same tree that still has the same roots in the same earth. So no matter where you go, there you are, right? So that was for me. That was my path. It was just about always remaining a seeker, always remaining somebody who wants to learn, always remaining somebody that likes to meet and interact with different people. You know, folks in West Africa say, hey, this man's a king, he's an Oba, you know, and so on and so forth. That's great. I appreciate it. I have that. I respect it. I keep it. And it's a very important thing, you know, and so forth. But what I'm saying is this, like, for example, if we talk about things like that, nobody in Africa made me to become a king. You either are or you're not. The ritual is just simply to ordain and to consecrate with the deities and the ancestors and so on and so forth what you already were. Nobody made anybody anything in this lifetime. You make yourself by your choices, your decisions, your mistakes, the things that you grow from and you learn from. Then you're always the co-architect of your destiny. You're always writing this yourself. So, you know, for me, I just wanted to go and learn and experience these things because my path was to always be learning and growing, developing, and trying to be the best version of myself that I could be. And then taking these lessons that I got, these valuable lessons, and saying, how can I share some of these lessons with maybe other people that find benefit from it, and being able to extract different things. Hey, we go train with Yas. We go train about, we took you up with this person or that person, because if you're truly a leader, an Oba or president or whatever, then you need to know a lot of people. And you also need to have a very broad, to me, you need to have a very broad portfolio, because it takes everybody working together in order to get things done. It may not be the way that I might want to do it, but this other person, that's what they need. So you facilitate that, but you have to be able to step out of judgment. So it's just, it's about how it shows up for each person individually. You know, that's your Ori and your Joto, all right, your ancestor that was with you from the beginning before you came. You know, that is always incarnating through you and guiding you and leading you. Your Joto takes you to go and to have these different, these different experiences. My Joto took me throughout all throughout West Africa, as well as multiple places throughout, throughout the world.
Absolutely. So Jean-Jerome, did you want to take it a little bit further from there? You said?
Yeah, the follow-up question then. And now you've mentioned Joto and the mission of the Joto. After having, been to West Africa as many times as you have, after the initiations that you have had, after the being privy to the different forms of divination and the different styles of or methods of worshiping or communicating with the spirit world. And again, for those that are listening to this broadcast, Ifá-Òrìsà or any of these indigenous belief systems is not a monologue. It's a dialogue, because they all have tools and methods to communicate, have a two-way conversation with the divine. How would you define at this stage, after having, anybody could argue, is a really extraordinary journey, spiritual journey, personal journey. And what I like about you, again, it's not just a spiritual, it's really a journey of personal growth and enlightenment. How would you define your practice, and where do you go from here? In other words, as you set the stage going towards the future. I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic.
Right.
The world is facing immense challenges. We have tragic events, and I take this opportunity to say Iba Iba Ntonu Sunreo for the poor man that was brutally killed by the police in the States, in Minneapolis. Our condolences on behalf of Ancestral Eyes, on behalf of the Consejo Cultural de Canada, for those families and for those people suffering every day with racial intolerance and violence and oppression. So our sympathies and our solidarity goes out to them. But in these very troubled times, how do you see the road forward? How do you see, you know, how would you define your path of worship of Ifá-Òrìsà? Where do you go from here?
Well, that's another fun question to answer. You know, what my teachers told me a long time ago. He said, and you know, and this is a Taoist perspective. It's not Yoruba or any particular African perspective, but it's a perspective that certainly applies, I think, to the world. And my teacher always said, the way that can be named is no longer the way. So the minute that you name something a certain thing, then it ceases to be so, because you've now fixed it. You've now arrested the natural flow of what something is. So if you say Ifa or whatever, you know, and you're looking at it from a human perspective, there are certain principles and key insights to what makes Ifa, Fa, Afa, what makes it what it is. Systems of divination, you know, that are done with Ikin, with Opele, Erindi Logun, you know, mirror gazing. You know, there's my experience throughout West Africa. Everybody, depending on what they did, where they had a talking, you know, deities or whatever it is, they refer to everything as Ifa, because Ifa is just considered to be the voice or the transmitted message of hope for all of humankind. And so whether they were talking to Shango or Obatala or, you know, Zangbeto or, you know, any other, you know, deities that they had, you know, in Benin, they've got, you know, Hindu deities and things like that they deal with, you know, that were imported there and whatever. It's part of, you know, their spiritual practice now, and different deities from all over the world, Egypt and different places that they have, different mystery schools, different magics. That's all kind of married into doing what they are today. But they always called everything Ifa. Every single thing that said it's Ifa. Oh yeah, Ifa says so. I'm like, oh, that's not. So for me personally, it forced me to not look at what we call Ifa as only one viewpoint, one lens. And this is from people throughout all of West Africa, all doing things very differently, but they all called it Ifa. So for me, you know, a lot of like how I hold the practice, you know, I teach divination. I work with people about things like dream interpretation, you know, basic levels of divination, you know, different training in the priesthood, you know, and of course, in any time you're working with somebody and things like that, you have to tailor the practice to the person, right? So that means you got to be able to see what everybody's skill sets, what their strengths and weaknesses are. Some people are really good and have really good sight, really good vision. They're natural seers. So I work with them within their gifts and help them to craft, you know, those particular things and whatever, while still maintaining the integrity of the practice. But it's, you know, so for me, it's fluid. And it's fluid because if I just, like, for example, for myself, I didn't go to one place and just learn Ifa for like the last 30 years in this village and whatever. I'm not like the lineage holder representative of some town in Nigeria where I'm the, you know, I'm their city rep. You know, that's cool. And it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not putting it down or certainly making light of it. I'm just saying that I went to these different places and I got to see that everybody did something different, but they all still called that. So to me, they were still respectfully calling whatever it was that they did, however different it may be, they still called it Ifa. And when everybody got together, they all respected one another. So for me, I tried to model that same perspective over here. Every one of my teachers, every person that I worked with, and when I say teacher, I don't mean like somebody that I was apprenticed and like, you know, bringing firewood to his house every day and all that other stuff. Like everybody, it shows up differently. And these are people I had good friendships with and relationships with. And they would tell me, Baba, you know, before you came to us, you already had training in this, you learned that, you've gone in these other things. And then now we've taught you how we do this in this place. Aspects of it. Doesn't mean I mastered everything, but I understood the underlying concepts of what they were sharing, and also specific rituals and things of that nature. And they said, take what you have from what you have there and what we've shared with you,
Make it your own.
As long as you respect the integrity and you keep what we've shared with you, keep it. Keep it the way that we've shared it with you. And when you have questions, and if something needs to, and maybe you don't have something, then divine, check with Ifá, check with the ancestors. As long as you're doing that, all the ancestral spirits that have made what we call collectively as Ifá will be with you and will support you in keeping the integrity of the practice, so long as you stay true. Stay true to being you. Be honest. Don't lie. Don't cheat. Don't steal. Don't call something that it's not. All these things, right? Many Odus, Ika-Ofun talk about that, and so on and so forth. As long as you do that, then our forefathers and what they gave to us will always be with you. And so that's what I seek to model over here. You know, we initiate a lot of people. I've initiated maybe, last I checked, I've initiated over 500 people into the tradition.
Whoa.
Across the board. Whether it's their hand Ifá, into the priest, I've initiated 50 some odd people into the priesthood of Ifá, almost 40 people into a priesthood of Òrìṣà, 25 plus people into Ogboni, into other different mystery schools and different things. So I mean, I've worked with a lot of different people, initiated a lot of people. Some are here, some remain, some don't. In any type of spiritual practice, your time together is what has been ordained for you to be together, and then you fulfilled your contract with that person. So that means your work was perfectly square. It means your work was true. You did what you do with that person. So I've had that that blessing and that opportunity to work with a lot of people, and so that's at the essence.
Amazing.
That's what I seek to model. A lot of people, different backgrounds. We got some Asian folks and Native American people and East Indian people, and we got a lot of Black folks here, and Black Americans, Black Canadians, Black Cubans, or whatever you want to call them. Everybody here just seeking to be the best human beings that we can possibly be, and trying to model the way that we want others to treat us, in the world.
Respect.
Sometimes somebody shows me something that I didn't know. Oh, Baba, in this lineage that I was initiating called Nomble, we do it like this. Oh, cool. Great. We take that, and okay, well, so maybe we'll specialize you in that particular area, and we'll create a section for that where you will be the person who's the overseer or leader of those particular mysteries and this and that, so that these things don't get lost, right? You have to. Right. It's like being a librarian. You have to have all these different people inside the library. So it's like one person's in charge of this data storage, other person's in charge of this. This way, information and knowledge doesn't get lost.
Absolutely. I'm just writing this down because I think I know who I'm correlating this with. So, no, absolutely. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, doesn't it? Is being able to relate to another human being, understanding their individuality, accepting the fact that they have an individual path, okay? Sure. Because my understanding with Ifá is that I'm allowed to be me and practice my own traditional ancestral roots without having been to be told in a dogmatic way that, oh, no, you cannot do this or whatever. No. And I mean, that's the beauty of Ifá, right? Is being able to accept that individual belief system within myself and expressing that, right?
No,
and that brings some people who feel otherwise. There are some people who feel that if you do Ifá, that you can only do Ifá, and you can't look at this, you can't be a part of that. And so that's a personal matter. Some people feel like, hey, listen, when I use mayonnaise in my sandwich, I can only have this type of sandwich when I have mayonnaise. Otherwise, it's all wrong. I don't do that. For some people, they use mayonnaise, they mix it with ketchup, they dip their fry. Oh, it's abomination. We never do that. Listen, it's about what the flavor is the point. Everybody has different taste buds.
Okay, Baba, stop with the food references. I'm getting hungry here.
I was just going to say that reference to mayonnaise and ketchup. My friend who's staying with me, Jocelyn, taught me that dip for my fries, and it's good.
Right. I mean, I've tried it. I mean, there's always a joke in the African American community: Black folks don't eat mayonnaise. That's another sidebar, but that's why I make the joke. But my family used to always make that joke all the time too. But but my point is that some people don't feel. Some people do feel that if you do Ifá, You need to keep only to a West African aesthetic and do it just the way this village does and whatever. And I have a lot of, let me be clear, I have a lot of respect for people who do it in that way. We do need people that are wisdom keepers, that have a certain way to learn this very specific thing, this specific skill set, and they keep it just so that it can be passed on in that particular way. Everybody, but that's not everybody's path. Everybody can't. Some people, their mind, it just works that way. They can learn. They go to this place, they learn, and it's great. And they do that, and we give reverence and grace to those people that can do that. But everybody doesn't necessarily do it that way. And that's okay. Like, we're not trying to make robots out of each other, because if we do that, if we do that, is when people ask me about, well, how do you see this about Black Americans or African Americans or Afro-Canadians, whatever? If we hold that perspective, then we run the risk of recolonizing ourselves. We run the risk of that. If we say there's only one way of doing things and whatever, then now the enslavement is a mental enslavement that we've inflicted upon ourselves, because we've taken this one viewpoint. And there's lots of people who may say, "Oh, this guy's full of it, doesn't know what he's talking about." That's cool. That's okay. That's respect for differences. But my parents always raised me that whatever it is that you do, just respect what everybody else does. If you don't like that, and I used to ask my mom all the time, "Well, Mom, how come so-and-so gets to do it like this?" My mom would say, "Well, I'm not that person's mother. I'm yours. So this is how we're going to do it, is X, Y, and Z." So my point saying is, it's okay for some people who want to do certain things a certain way. And it doesn't mean that somebody's making things up. Like, that's what I wanted to see in Africa, because I heard a lot of stories throughout the year. People say, "Oh, this guy's thing," like in Spanish, they call it sancocho, right? It's like his gumbo. He's doing a little of this, a little of that, all this other stuff all over the place, right? Sometimes they use it as a way of talking about stupid. Sometimes they use it as a slang of saying that somebody's just all over the place. They're just grabbing a bunch of stuff and throwing it in a pot and calling it something different. So I've heard that said within Ifa. Oh, this person takes a little of this, he takes a little of that. He's like cherry picking what he likes to do and calling it his own thing. But when I got to Africa and spent so many trips and went all throughout West Africa, then that means that everybody's guilty of that. If that's true, because everybody was some slight nuances, different things, certain deities that they had that were specific to their family, that nobody else in a different village knew about that. Certain things that that you can't do it that way. That's absolutely, that deity never takes that. So I got to see that inside of all these glaring contradictions, there was still everybody working with and having this bi-directional relationship with the deities and with the spirits, depending upon how their mother and their father and their progenitors taught them how to work with those particular divinities. So it's not that people are just cherry picking. It's that everybody thought West Africa's got a slightly different way. People in Africa probably hot peppers in their food.
Their own taste, their own flavor.
Yeah, some people just like, "No, Baba, I don't like it. It's too hot. I don't like it like that. We don't make this. We don't do that." I like that because I wanted to see for myself. Is it true? Yeah. Many people would say, "Oh, African Americans are lazy. They don't want to do Ifa the way the traditional people do it back home and this and that. They want to take shortcuts." Is that really true? Let's find out. So I went and I saw, well, listen, everybody's doing some things differently. But so the answer was, are you doing it with integrity? And if you are doing things differently, what is your reason? Nobody can speak for what's going on in somebody else's mind for why the reasons are. So to talk to them, because I wanted to find out for myself, and I documented it. I videotaped every trip I made. I've taken pictures, notes. I've got a whole room, all these notebooks here of all my notes throughout the years.
Wow.
Archive.
Good for you.
Nobody can tell, "Oh, no, that's not true." Oh, hold on a second. When I met with Babalawo, so he said, hold on a second, and I quote, "X, Y, Z, and so and so, so and so." What do you say? Oh, I'm just saying. Here's a picture. This guy here in Togo. Are you sure that's not the right way?
Yeah.
You know, when you do that, and to me, it shows that you're somebody who learned and you've seen different perspectives and things, because, in any spiritual practice, you always will get some people that do things with integrity, and you'll always get some people who try to dupe someone in anything that you do in life. So that means the only way you can know is to go and fight.
Absolutely true.
I like adventure. So I said, well, let me go out there and go see, what's going on. Let me go talk to these people in this village. And I would go and I'd say, "Hey, Baba, this guy in this other village says you never do X, this and this and this and this. And this is wrong. About who said that? Well, my father did this. You're telling me that my grandfather this and that. And like, so you realize like these are like touchy topics. Like, okay. Yeah. So after a while, I stopped asking. I just said, let me just go and see what everybody does. I didn't bother to go and tell this person. Well,
let me watch.
Last week, he said you ain't ever supposed to do that. I just kept like this. And I just watched and observed, wrote notes, took pictures. I was okay if I take video? Yeah, go ahead. Take video, and then now refer to these things and use it to build on it, because I said, listen, I don't know what I'm going to do with that right now. But when I get back home, maybe
at some point it'll come in handy.
I'll find some use for this information.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
I think it's important as well. It's part of the dynamic, living, breathing nature. These are not traditions that are carved in stone,
sure,
and remain unchanged through the ages. We have to understand that for all of our indigenous belief systems, we're talking about spiritual powers that typically, fall under 5 elemental categories: air, fire, water, earth, and also metal, gu. And that these spiritualities, together with the ancestors of each of these traditions, their relationship with those vodus or those spirits of nature, those spirits or emissaries of the creator, were different. And some of those, driven by sometimes the ancestor or the joto that the person had, and their own experience. So, that's why even some people don't realize to the extent of the differences that in the old days, each town had its own Odu of Ifa. In Benin and in Nigeria, each would cast an Odu of Ifa that would define the Odu of Ifa for the town.
Sure.
Right? And they would have typically they would have maybe a few deities or divinities, but there would always be one in particular that was considered the custodian or the protector of the town.
Yeah.
A clear and present example of that is Oshun and Oshobo.
Yes.
Right? Where Oshun is, or Shango in Oyo.
Yes.
Right? Where you have one particular ancestor who was in tune with the energy and the spirit of the primordial Inmale, or Jivodun, however you define it, depending on where you are, that really led and exemplified the energies and the capabilities of that particular spirit. And they did it, and that experience was shaped by their own joto, their own guiding spirit, and their own life experiences and the mission that they had to accomplish on Earth. So that's why it's it's very important to respect all of these things, because it is the collective experience in the collective dialogues of all these different towns where we find the truth. That's why Bedi, we say not one person has all the wisdom, not one person has all the knowledge. The knowledge and the wisdom was spread throughout all the world, and not just West Africa.
Sure.
Right? Because a lot of these traditions, as much research comes, and there's again much polemic debates and everything else, but many of these traditions, many of these archetypes of spiritualities, many of these types of relationships of divination and communication with the spirit world, you can find them in Old Kemet in Egypt, both Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt. The areas of Kemet, Nubia, within the group of mariners and traders called the Phoenicians, in Mesopotamia, whether it be the Akkadians, the Semitic Akkadians, or the Sumerians, in Persia, in current day Iran, in Russia,
absolutely,
among the shamanic people of Siberia and the Slavic people, right? As we have our own Slavic witch here with us.
That's
The truth, and what's wonderful in my own experience over these many years, and what really gives me a personal sense of fulfillment and enjoyment and satisfaction, is to know that when, as Baba says, when I consult Ifa, and when Ifa gives an anecdote, a lesson, a message, I can find those archetypes and relate those archetypes to other cultures.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
You know, and we have to respect, even within Ifa, that the world of the ancestors is very broad.
Absolutely.
Right? We're talking about a global village which has many things in common. We all have to deal with the five elements. We can't escape.
That's right.
Right? And you know, this earth, Mother Earth, Onile, Onile Onile Obedura, Eda, whatever you term it, whatever you define it as, you know, we will find those archetypes, we will find those relationships, and they speak to us in any culture. So what I've always found interesting, when Ifa is practiced truly with a universal spirit, and it can adapt to the land and the culture and the ancestry of the person to which Ifa is speaking to, then Ifa truly is the language of the gods, if you will, right? Because and of the ancestors, right? Oyekun Okana says the memory of our ancestors are found in the Odus of Ifa, but those ancestors were not all Yoruba. They were Fongwe, they were Congo, they were Mesopotamian, they were Kemetic, they were Siberian, they were European, they were North. And that's why you'll find across all these cultures, across all these ancient belief systems, the vestiges and the common elements, symbols, right, that really represent or are the proof, the footprint of our ancestors, right?
That's certainly been my experience. I mean, everywhere that I've gone and different places to see things, I mean, you know, and it's certainly not to take away from Ifa or Orisha. I'm not taking anything away from what's done in West Africa or other places where they might call it different things. You know, even in the Islamic system, they have a system they call Ramil.
Yes.
With the sand cutting that they use, where they mark different signs in the sand and they do divination. And rather than doing like Ebo, what the Yoruba call Ebo, make sacrifice, they may chant verses, different surah from the Quran with the mala, with the prayer beads, a certain number of times as their version of making Ebo and things like that, combined sometimes with sacrifice, a kill a ram or whatever. But also there's certain prayer or dua that they use when they're doing different prayers inside those systems and whatever. You go to Mali, they have different things, you know, different cultures. You know, you've got, you know, some people talk about Anunnaki and Sumeria, all these different things. My point, what I'm saying is that, you know, I certainly, you know, have found that to be the case, that when people are trying to do things with integrity, with good character, and really being connected with what the spirit of whatever the practice is, spirit of Ifa, the spirit of Orunmila, you know, or whatever you want to call it. Like, for example, some Orisha that we know of as Orisha today, right? Or Orunmila, or depending upon what we're talking about. Some verses in Ifa, if you're talking about, say, Shango or Batala or whatever, Orunmila. Orunmila is the spirit of wisdom, right? Orunmila, heaven knows my destiny, right? So that's the spirit of destiny. But there are also verses inside of Ifa that talk about people that when they were alive were known as the Orunmila of their time, or the Shango of their time. Or so certain people had certain abilities, certain gifts, certain skills, certain metaphysical powers or magical abilities that people call, this person Shango, he's this and that. So are we talking about the deity, or are we talking about the person who was the living embodiment of that? So
my ancestor, essentially a deified ancestor.
Ancestor, right?
Yeah.
So when we're looking at things like what we referred, you know, one of my master teachers told me these are things like totems. So we're talking about is person, the turtle came to Ifa. The Achapa came to Ifa because he was having this issue of so and so. They consulted Babalawo. The Babalawo said he did this and this and this, make a sacrifice of this many roosters, this many bottles of gin, and so on and so forth, right? So, okay. So we know that some of these some things have changed. Okay? So we know there's been some evolution. But there's totems inside of these verses, and these animals, the number of things that are being asked for, the way the Ebo is being asked for, the way the verse is spoken about, tells us additional hidden or unknown occult knowledge inside of what's happening, inside of what Ifa says, what we need to do ritually for the person. So those who are priests have gone more deeply into the awo, or the secret of what that particular thing is. So for example, so how do we apply that here in North America, where we live? For example, you say, okay, we have blue jays. Blue jays are not indigenous to West Africa. These are things that are like in North America. So when we pray to Orisha, when we pray to these deities, and we have different signs and symbols and different totems that come out, what happens if you're a traditionally trained priest and you only know the Yoruba way, and a blue jay shows up in the middle of some ritual you made to this particular deity, but it wasn't the bird or this animal that you're used to seeing, this totem in West Africa? But in West Africa, you know, okay, when I make this or Totemeji says we're going to have this moth or this butterfly comes out, and so on and so forth, as a sign from Olodumare that this prayer is being answered. So what happens now? You're in another land, and now the animals and the totems through which nature itself, she speaks to us, are not found where you live. How do you know that Ifa, the Joto, that the Most High is talking to you, if you only know how to interpret things in one way? So any spiritual practice that you're engaged in should be teaching you how to take whatever it is that they're giving you, understand the principle of it, and be able to know how it works when you find yourself somewhere else. Because Babalawos these days travel all around the world. All these Nigerian Babalawos, Babalawos from Benin, from Togo, this and that. They travel to Brazil, they travel to Colombia, they go to Cuba, this and that and the other. So what happens when you're in a different place? See, everybody knows that. Everybody knows that you have to, everybody at the court, everybody there knows how to interpret these things. It's just a matter of whether or not everybody else here is told this, because people here in the diaspora are very religious. People want to be told it's only like this, it's only like that, because it affirms this sense of control, which in and of itself is an illusion. No one has control of anything anyway. Most of us can't control, you know, what our thoughts are from day to day. All these things, none of us have control. So anybody who thinks that they're in control, you're already engaged in a form of self-delusion, right? That's Maya, right? Or you can call that in Buddhism, that's Maya, right? So the world, the realm of illusion. So those are like things that like different teachers would share with me, like, hey, you know, you got to take a look at what you have over there, because there would be times that certain things would show up, or certain manifestations of spirit that was like, well, when I did this ritual in West Africa or in Togo, this thing happened. But what happens now when something's different? Does that invalidate the ritual? Does that make it not so? No. Because Oturupameji, from Yoruba Ifa, Oturupameji talks about Oyepolu, talks about a person who had been initiated to Ifa by his father. His father took him back and forth to Ile-Ife to go perform festivals and ceremonies and so on. This is like the Cliff Notes version of it. So his father passed away. The story says he passed away before he had a chance to train him deeply in Ifa. And so then now the time came for him to go perform his yearly supplications at the temples and in Ifa and to Orisha. And now he didn't know what he was supposed to do. Was he supposed to give palm oil? Was he supposed to give gin, kola nut, or rogbo? Which animal? He didn't do. So he started breaking tears crying. And Ifa said, the Ethiopian swallower, Alakandede, came, and the voice of the ancestors said, all those who are doing things in the spirit of sincerity, that all your prayers must be accepted. So that's why many times in classical Ifa, many Babalawos or Bokono, whatever you want to call them, Awos, Onishegun, whatever you wish to call, you know, Onifas, they will chant that verse because they're calling upon all the ancestors of the land and of those who shared any knowledge with them to make corrections in case there's any errors, anything that they've missed, anything they made a mistake, anything they maybe forgot inside the ritual, realizing that the spirit of the ancestors, through their sincerity, is going to see to it that what they're doing is going to manifest, and it's going to be just so. So the key takeaway is what? The takeaway is be sincere. Don't fake the funk. As long as you're being sincere about things and you're doing things from that mindset, then you're going to get the support from the spirit realm and from the deities.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I like Alex de la Vega says, what Odu was that?
That's Otrupameji, Ologbomeji.
Otrupameji.
Mm-hmm.
Otrupameji. Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about, I don't know, are there any more questions, or is there anything that Baba Faseye wants to say, or Jean Jerome? Do you have anything more that you want to say? Because I want to talk about a little bit, just kind of go a different little path if we can.
Yeah, let's go a little different little path, and then I'll read something which something that Baba Faseye said earlier reminded me of. And for the benefit of the, but go ahead, go into the different direction for a moment.
Okay. All right. So I don't know if anybody's noticed, but we at Ancestral Eyes have gotten our own logo. Okay. And this logo is presented as we see here. It is it's a black widow spider, or a representative of black widow spider, but within her, okay, the symbology and what she represents is what we're about at Ancestral Eyes. Okay. So first of all, I had a dream, and in that dream, the mothers came to me and they had told me specifically it has to be a spider, and it has to be the black widow spider because of her colors, the black and the red. Okay. And right away, as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, that is Eshu. All right. Yes, but it's also the Iami. It's a representative of the Iami, the colors, plus to me, the grandmother spider. That's how I see it. And when you think about the spider and the web that she weaves, she integrates the entire world. Okay. She is like Mother Earth in that sense, right? She's grandmother spider. So we've got the colors. There's the two. Now, I don't know if you can can you enlarge it a little bit, Jean Jerome, so we can kind of take a look at it? So we can.
Give me one sec.
This one is particular to us, and when I say us, meaning Canada, okay? Because this spider, the black widow here in Canada, which I don't know if some people know or not, but I was bit by a black widow spider and had a near-death experience by our very own Canadian black widow spider. And
wow,
I don't know if you can notice, but she's a little bit different than other spiders. Her appendages, her legs, she's got stripes of red as well as black. And that pertains specifically to the Canadian black widow. I think her name, the Latin name is something Aurora mactans, et cetera, right? So anyway, so that is particular to us. So we thought, okay, so we're going to put that little Canadian flag or the emblem, the maple leaf there at the top. And the two eyes, the two cowrie shells of, Ifa, right? The divination of Ifa, but also the two primordial snakes of creation within her body. And we know that within the body of the black widow, it's an hour-shaped, a red hour-shaped figure. While the two snakes, like I said, are the snakes of creation, sky and earth. And then the weaving pattern between the snakes, that's the ancestral link. All right. And as I was talking to Jean Jerome earlier today about, it kind of looks almost like a rune. And what rune was that, did you say, Jean Jerome?
So the red is from rune from the Norse mythology, the Futhark, which is called Dagas. And the Dagas means, has a symbology of daylight, dawning, awakening, realization, enlightenment. And the
right.
pole, or the image in the middle, again, is a symbology of the tree of life, or in the Yoruba, the Iroko, right? Tree where it is said that the ancestors and the divinities come back and go back and forth, And on the Vodun side, in full wave, they're called Loko, which is the tree, the Roko tree, which is a divinity in itself, where, and that symbolism is found, the tree of life is found in the Anunnaki, in Sumeria, also in the Norse mythology, in the great
Celtic
tree,
people?
the Celtic. So it is believed that the ancestors, the divinities, including the mothers, all descend through that central image, right?
Wonderful.
Right, exactly. So that kind of explains our logo. I love her. I think she's awesome. I love the elegance of the Black Widow spider. She's deadly, and yet she's very elegant and eloquent. That's how I look at her. All right. Now we also have our own logos, because as we were mentioning a little bit earlier in our conversation, where I was, getting a little carried away with the NAFTA of Ifa, I wanted to look at the different logos of our union, our strategic relationships that we have formed here in North America. Okay, so we talked about ours. Now, as far as
Benin, that's true. Yes.
Jean-Jerome, do you want to talk a little bit about the Consejo?
The Consejo, yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm just gonna give me 2 seconds. That is true. That is true. Just replying to one of our audience.
Okay.
So yeah, the turtle Hayapa is very sacred to the Yoruba.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sacred to different Orisha, everything from Osayin to Shango, and it also is representative of what the many cultures, including the First Nations of this country or this continent, called Turtle Island.
Right.
So the idea was they bring the symbologies of Ifa and their adaptation into the North American context, as we were saying, with the elements or the tools of the Babalawo or Ifa, like the Irukere, the Irofa, the symbol of Ogboni, to represent that we practice Ifá-Òrìsà and indigenous worship of Ogboni here. And again, the shared maple leaf to show we're definitely in Canada, and that we also have the eyes and the cowrie shells, not just representative of the Orisha or Ifa, but also as a portal, or the eyes, symbolic of the eyes of the ancestors of this land as well, right? To respect that the ancestors, no matter where you are, they're always watching. And that's basically the major symbology of the tortoise that we have. Baba Faseye, for your symbol, the chameleon, can you talk a little bit about the importance of the chameleon?
The chameleon is considered sacred inside the tradition. Obviously, we all know a chameleon can take on any color, or can change its appearance in order to fit in with wherever it finds itself.
Adaptive.
It's adaptive. So we use that to represent the respectful fluidity of our practice and the ability to blend in wherever it is that one finds themselves. So also chameleons also sacred to Obatala, Obatasa, Obatarisha. Obatala is a very sacred totem of Obatala. Some people also say it's also can show up with some totems with things with the Lokun. There's different types of medicines and things that are used inside of Ifa that use chameleon, as medicine, medicine for protection and things of that nature. It also chameleon is also considered to be a totem that can also show up inside of Ogboni as well, with which we have a functioning Ogboni fellowship and federation, of which I'm the spiritual leader of here in North America as well. So in other words, the the chameleon, shows up in this an art symbol and our logo to represent the totality of all these practices together. So Ifa, Òrìsà, Ògbóni, all those things, it can show up as a sacred symbol or a sacred totem that we use. So that's why we refer to our temple as Ile Ala Òrìsà, Ala Òrìsà Temple, because we're talking about the light. So we want to be good keepers. We want to be light bearers in this world that we live in today. That's
right.
So that's why we pair these things together. Even inside of Ògbóni, we have totems. We talk about things with the light and so on and so forth. I'm the RA of our association, or the president general of our Ògbóni fellowship that we have here. And so, we take a lot of these teachings and kind of pair them together to see, in different things that you belong in, inside of Ifa, Òrìsà, Ògbóni, depending on what it is that you're part of. Then we go more deeply into some of the esoteric, meanings and understandings behind those things. So the chameleon just happened to show up one time. We were trying to figure out what we wanted to use for a logo, and then
wow,
we happened to find there happened to be a chameleon, going by the house, walking along the fence. I said, that's the
there sign. You go.
There we go. So that's what the deities want us to use, and so it's stuck. It's stuck ever since.
The totem animal of the land, right?
Yeah, within Vodun, the chameleon is called Segbo Lisa. So Lisa being in Cuba, they synchronize, or they have the equivalency of Lisa with Obatala. So they say Obatalisa. Obatalisa means Segbo Lisa. So there's also, again, showing the universality of the totem, as Baba Faseye is saying.
Okay, and I think, do you have the logo for Baba Nelson too, Jean-Jerome?
Yeah, it's there. It's the green Ifá World Conference. He's used the symbol of the Open Ifá, the green one there. Yeah, this one here. Again, symbolizing the Open of Ifá. And for believers, Open Ifá represents the world. And, in it is represented all the mysteries and the healing, and the ebbos and the divination is done. Every ceremony for Babalawo is mostly done on Open Ifá because it represents the world. It's our microcosm, spiritual microcosm of the world. Correct. And so he has other, symbology there, like Eya, Eyaoro. He has also, I believe, a chameleon there as well, and the Opele, and the head on the top of the Opon is usually indicative of Eshu, which is an essential part of our belief, the universal messenger, the carrier, one who carries the Ashe, who distributes the Ashe, who communicates and takes a bow and our prayers to the divinities, and from the divinities, the results and the efficacy back to the realm of the earth. In the middle, this is from our friend, family member, Bokono Daniel Dafoji, who was initiated in Abomey as a Bokon for the Fagbasa. The symbol in the middle represents an ancestral asen, which is basically a staff that is representative of calling the ancestors, and almost like an altar and a spiritual focal point of the ancestors. We have similar symbology in the Osanyin staff, also other symbology within the Osun staff, and so forth. For instance, when Babalawos or any initiation to Bodu, you have the Osu, Opa Osu, that which is used. And again, it shows that universal symbol to channel, to represent the authority of the ancestors, the authority of Ifa, the authority of the divinities, or in the case of Osign, the authority of Osign, to do the ceremonies, to carry out the mysteries that are going to be carried out. And the Vodun Fa, again, represents the practice of Vodun Fa. And Abomale is actually Danielle's Joto, with which she's been basically in having transpossession for 40 years now. His anniversary was this. And again, the Eku is a sacred symbol for Ogboni, sacred symbol even for Ifá-Òrìsà, and for the Vodun, it's a sign of kingship. It's a sign of the ancestors. It has many mysteries. Ekun has many mysteries, very associated also with Orunmila as well. Has many aspects. And it really, again, shows kingship, authority, ancestral authority as well. And I'm just going to shrink this and move it over. And then I'm going to pull up a different one since we're unveiling logos. And so people can see the different organizations. And again, for people watching, this represents a grouping of many Babalawos, Olorisha, Elegun, Apetibi, Fa, from different walks of life, from different cultures, different backgrounds, and everything else. So allow me 1 second. And I'm going to introduce a very special logo for our very own Slavic witch.
Hey.
That's me. So I was formerly known as the Crone's Corner, okay? I was acknowledging my cronehood, this stage of my life, okay? But at the same time, I said, you know what? I'm honoring my own ancestral roots. I'm honoring my ancestral Joto, and I decided to call myself the Slavic witch.
Wonderful.
So from here on in, Slavic witch. I love it. There's a little bit of a story to this. Today we were making the changes, and on Facebook, Jean-Jerome assisted me because I am not tech savvy at all. Okay. So Jean-Jerome turned around and he said, okay, well, I'll change the name for you. And as he's saying this, he says, it'll take about 3 days or so. And I said, oh, okay. Within 60 seconds, my name went from the Crone's Corner to the Slavic witch like that. And I said, Jean-Jerome, that means this is a blessing by the ancestors for sure, that this is the path of this is what I'm to be called. So Jean-Jerome was kind enough to actually design this for me. And we were talking about it in the last couple of days or so. And I was giving him sort of ideas of what I wanted to do or where I'm going with this, because it represents right smack in the middle, that image. If you could sort of blow it up a little bit, it's Yemoya. But it's Yemoya as she is represented in the Slavic tradition as the mermaid that holds the sword, and she is the representative for Warszawa, for the city of Warsaw. Okay. And as soon as I saw that, I was just like, oh my God, I love it. And just everything about her and just the lettering all around her, I was just in awe. But my eye turned to the left and I saw the woman, the bird woman. Okay. And that in Slavic culture, the Russian, I forget what her name is, something Yemakun. I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but anyway, I can go into more detail and put it up on my own Facebook page and go into more of the details. But that is also representative of the Iami. Okay. And the thing is too, that is an oracle. So she represents the one who is a prophet, and she brings forth messages as well. And then when we go over to the complete other side, those two deities is Velish and Perun. And if you kind of look at their colors, it sort of represents Eshu at the same time. Velish is the horned one, and he is also the god of vegetation. He is a representative of Osayin. He does the magical herbs. He's also part of Iami in that sense, but he's also the one that brings forth the darker aspect. Okay. Then on the other side, we have Perun, who obviously is lighter in color, but he is lightning. He is fire. Okay. And so they're completely opposite. And that kind of really reminds me of Eshu can be that way, right? But if you look at within Velis himself, he also has the egg and a snake. And of course, that has a lot of meaning to me, right? Through the things that we've been talking about in the last few days. But I just love that symbology, completely opposite one another. I just loved it. It was sort of that male and female balance, right? And then right at the top is a picture of me, okay, in my witchy costume. All right. It's going to be changed. I have a feeling I know where I'm going with that, but I love it anyway. It's always been one of my favorite pictures of myself as a witch, right? But the one directly below, okay, now that, okay, I know people are going to laugh, all right, but that is, okay, Sasquatch, Bigfoot. The Yeti, the Russian Yeti, is known as the Mank. They're the tall, giant people who live in the forests in Siberia. In particular, to where my Joto is from, in the place that I believe it was the Dietlov incident that took place in 1959. And from that part of Siberia, we have the Kant people, the Mansi people, and they honor this as an ancestor because he is the forest. He represents the forest spirits. Okay. So to me, that is representative of him. So when Jean Jerome put this all together, I was just like, honest to God, he floored me. I just went, oh my God, I loved it. I immediately loved it. And I said, well, that's me. That's the Slavic witch. And that's what all of those symbols represent to me. So this is my big, great unveiling. And I thank you very much, Jean Jerome, for doing that for me and for me to be able to talk about that.
No problem. No problem. Baba Faseye, it's been a pleasure to have you with us on Ancestral Eyes. I thank you first for our long friendship for these many years.
Sure.
For being there in the good times, the bad times, and the so-so times. And for your loyalty, for your integrity, for your knowledge, for your experience, and for being a friend, a brother, and a mentor.
Sure.
And so thank you very much for, and that you know, and that everybody in our combined community knows that you have with you the full support of the Consejo Cultural Yoruba de Canada, of the Slavic Witch, of Bocono Daniel's Vodunfa community, Abomale community in Uruguay, of Baba Nelson's Ifá World Conference, and there's the research group of 17 Babalawos and the lineage from Lagos. And that, we like to lead by example. And we as we said earlier, it's not about having absolute control or trying to run the show or dictate how things are done within a belief system, but to show and lead by example, by respect, by heart and intention, from the support of the ancestors, support of the Orisha, support of the Voodoo, support of the spirit world, and the Olodumare or Mau, whatever name of the creator one would like to use, depending on the lineage, and that we respect and we celebrate our differences, but more importantly, that we provide for those that are seeking guidance and looking for their own truth, and to discover the mission of their ancestor, the mission of their Odi, their destiny, that they can find a safe, warm, welcoming environment among the family of Egbe that represented here, and that they know that we respect each other, and if we are together, it is because of that shared respect and love and desire to help humanity. As Babalawos, both Baba Faseye and I swore to help humanity, to save humanity wherever we could.
Sure.
Saving humanity doesn't mean you put a stranglehold on anyone, but it's that you support them and that you really try to seek the spirit of Ifa, the spirit of the universal message, to try to help those people to live the best life that they can, the best destiny that they can for themselves, for their children, for their families, and their communities. So thank you again, Baba Faseye, for joining us. Over to you, Teresa.
Thank you.
Yeah, for having me here.
Thank you very much, Baba Faseye. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure. It really was. Learned a lot. I'm always about learning. So
me as well.
I hope everybody else got a chance to learn. And my friend Claire, what does she have to say? All logos are awesome with such special meanings. And yes, Teresa, love your logo. Thank you to you all as usual. Very interesting. Bless you all. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you to everybody.
Everybody
who tuned in.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
To
all of you.
Baba Faseye, if you'd like to say something to the Iledi and to the community.
I just wanted to again just say thank you. Thank you both for having me here. It's great to be able to have an opportunity to to share. There's always a lot of talk, always people and anything we do where we're passionate about. We all have differing perspectives and viewpoints about things. It's always nice to be able to have an opportunity to have a platform to be able to speak your own narrative, of what my experience, what my background is, some of my heritage and things like that, places I've been able to go and things that I've been able to experience. So, I'm grateful for being able to have an opportunity to, to share a little bit, give a little bit of my background and just, have opportunities to be able to connect with, fellow, practitioners and devotees and worshipers of, different backgrounds and things like that. It's always a pleasure to be able to do so. So, I'm grateful for, for my wife and children, my family, and thankful to my ancestors, my Joto, and all the Orishas who've guided me and have assisted me in fulfilling, living my destiny. Ifa says, no one can bury another person's destiny. No one can bury another man or woman's destiny. And,
Ashe.
On the shoulders of my ancestors, of the people who've come before me that have made it possible. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for, all the priests and priestesses and the chiefs in our temple, our Iledis and inside of our Ifa, Orisha temples and students and people who've been with me. We have students we've been together for over 10 years and people who've been together for a long time. So, I'm grateful, and definitely extend fraternal greetings to all the brethren and, here, our global community as well. So again, just want to say thank you and I'm grateful for this opportunity. Looking forward to, making more friendships, making more connections with people. If anybody needs to reach me or anything like that, I think, we've seen from the logos, people can reach me. I think my website's up there for anybody who's interested in, connecting, and having further communication, things of that nature. I'm always available to answer questions or dialogue or things like that with good people. So I always preface that, people can decide how they show up for that, but we're always here to connect with good people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Most time.
Now,
we thanks to O'Neill for this today.
Ashe.
Ashe. Absolutely. Now, Jean Jerome. So, before we forget, because we've done that before, next week, who do we have for our next week's guest?
Well, I will let you do the introduction. We have our
I don't have it in front of me.
Give me 1 second.
Hold on. I wrote it down because I asked you earlier, and then I went, oops. Hold on.
Larissa Orshak Koronovsky.
Yes, my friend Larissa Orszak Koronovsky. She is a Siberian Tuva shamaness.
Oh, wonderful.
I look forward to her. And I ask everybody to tune in next week. Again, we have another great guest. So with that, I want to say thank you to everybody who tuned in. I appreciate everybody tuning in and joining us. I'm loving these shows myself. I get to interview interesting people, get to meet new people, get to talk deeper with some of my Facebook friends, right? And I love it. So I want to thank everybody and have a wonderful weekend that's coming up. And everybody, please stay safe. Okay. Take care of one another. Be kind to one another. All right. And may God bless. All right. Take care.
Odabo.
Odabo. Odabo.
Ota.